So, welcome to today's episode of ECA TechTalks, and I'm really happy to welcome Sebastian Gajek to our podcast today, who is the co-founder of Enclaive, which is one of our esteemed members at the ECA. So I'm very happy to have you, Sebastian. Hi.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks for having me.
So, Sebastian, as I said, you're the co-founder of Enclaive. You're also a professor for IT security and cryptography at the Hochschule Flensburg, a university in the north of Germany. And you also identify yourself as the guardian of the cloud galaxy, what I found on your LinkedIn profile, so I had to pick it up, of course. But please tell us a little bit about you and where you're coming from, and also what Enclaive is doing.
All right. Sure. Happy to do that. And it's also good to know that someone, has been on my LinkedIn profile because I recently, changed that punchline to Guardian of the Clouds. Yeah, I'm a full-fledged security guy. Started a standard career more in the academic research sector, first of all, graduated from renowned Foursquare Institute for IT Security, which is like one of the leading European academic institutes for IT security research. I think more than 100 people, meanwhile, work there, tackle security problems from different angles, like economic problems, not only technical or social aspects. Really a great facility. I was really lucky to be one of the very first students that graduated there. And that somehow, because, PhD is like any other degree, just a journey. And I just learned that, despite, doing research for more than 4 years in security, I figured out that actually, there's still more to learn. And that's why I, went to the cyber place, which people understand the holy grail of IT security, namely Israel. Used also to do R&D activities there for 2 years something. And then at some point, I relocated back to Germany, where I had a leading executive position for security innovation. So I used to work in an industrial environment, and my mission was to use security technologies and innovative security technologies. My academic background is perfect because, academia is always about new, cool ideas. But in the end, industry needs people that mediate between product design and research. And this way, you typically come up with super innovative solutions. And one of the core problems in the information technology, computer security sector has always been the ability to compute on encrypted data. It sounds a bit techy and geeky, but effectively the reason why we would like to have a solution to this problem is because when we can run any code, any application, any database, virtual machine, or Kubernetes cluster, whatever people use in order to run applications, when we achieve this, then suddenly we have a box where we can run and execute the code. And this box somehow, makes sure that this code is not hackable, at least, from the outside. And this is a terrific breakthrough, specifically these days when everybody talks about cloud computing, right? Because cloud computing is about taking someone else's resources and compute infrastructure and just executing and deploying your own applications and business logic. And this conflicts a bit with, regulations or even business interests. For example, companies are interested in, protecting their own IPs. They don't want, a third party like the infrastructure provider to snoop in their data and their business processes because, it's a potential risk to leakage. And leakage, may be a reason that somehow conflicts with our own business interest. Yeah. Furthermore, regulated industry, for example, in the health sector or in the public sector, they care much about the data security, privacy, or a lot of regulations. I think very prominent one is, for example, GDPR. So those industries need to enforce some security and privacy principles, and putting, for example, their data and their applications that process the data in those black boxes, which we call enclaves, by the way, helps them a lot to comply with those regulations. And this problem, as mentioned, was the driver of actually my activities almost the last decades. I tried to tackle that from different angles. For example, using cryptographic tools, because this is my profession as a cryptographer. These tools are, for example, called fully homomorphic encryption or multi-party computation. Also built with those tools some amazing products, but at some point, of course, figure out that those tools have strong limitations, and the typical limitations are like performance issues. They are not really easy to use. And that somehow resulted in the conclusion that those tools have only, limited applicability, specifically if you want to build applications, in a business environment with that. And fortunately, I think more than almost 10 years ago, there was a new approach to solve this problem. It's based on TE technologies. TE is like the term or the abbreviation for trusted execution environments. Typically, we use so-called hardware trust anchors in order to realize that. And recently, those TE-enabled hardware was combined with standard CPUs that Intel, AMD, ARM, ship. And they came up with a very simple engineering approach to solve the problem of computing encrypted data. And suddenly, we have like new opportunities. And actually, due to the simplicity, we also have a great breakthrough, because finally we can really create those black boxes and have no performance penalty. It's easy to use because literally as a software developer, you have to do nothing. Everything is meanwhile out there in order to activate this technology. And this is a stepping stone in order to change, a lot of security problems in, a lot of industries. And one of the core use cases is of course, cloud computing, or how people call it these days, confidential cloud computing. We can finally run any workloads in a cloud, even in a public cloud that is managed, for example, by one of the hyperscalers, and still, make sure that our data, programs, code is enclave running in the black box, and this way shielded against the infrastructure provider. And once we figure out that, all the dots, can finally be connected, that was, the starting point for our venture. And
so the idea is I have an application. I want to run an application in the cloud. I want it to be secure. And so I can use the Enclaive services or technologies basically to run it in a public cloud or with a hyperscaler, but still have it secure and confidential, only accessible by myself and not by those service providers, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. So the example, we give our clients is like, an analogy to the way, for example, banks operate, right? Because banks, are known that, they somehow safeguard and protect your asset, your money. And they do everything in order, to protect your asset against robbery, right? That's why, they have those thick walls, they have like a security service, cameras, it's fantastic, we do a great job. But nevertheless, they offer a service, and the service is that you can rent a safe deposit box in that bank where only you have the key to, right? So even a bank director, any clerk, any, malicious third party intruder has no access anymore. And this is effectively, how enclave technology works. So you can, for example, think about the cloud or the infrastructure providers like the bank does already a pretty good job in order to protect your assets. But nevertheless, in some use cases or in some settings or in some industries, you still want that safe box or the safe deposit box. And this is where enclavation comes into the game.
At the European Champions Alliance, we talk about European topics and we talk about European cybersecurity. So how and why is this so important in a European context to adopt this confidential cloud technology? And how does it align with the political and regulatory landscape that we have in Europe? Why is it also important, or why would it be important for European companies to work with companies like you, who are European too, German company? And what is a little bit the stake here that we have to understand?
It's a very good question, and I think there are several angles to answer that question. So let me start maybe with historical motivation. Europe is known in order to be, say, privacy-friendly environment, right? That's why, a long time ago, we introduced, for example, the GDPR as, one example. But the European Union and even each European country, has their own laws that somehow describe or somehow help citizens to realize that data is an asset and this asset needs to be protected. Yeah. A great counterexample are, for example, those social media, which used to be controversially discussed and debated in the past because they somehow had access to some, say, privacy critical data and used that in order, on the one hand, to of course build an amazing business model, based on the data. But on the other hand, for example, the Cambridge Analytics use case showed that once you have this data, you somehow have knowledge, and this knowledge may be misused in order to manipulate citizens of the European Union. The Brexit was heavily coined by the intoxication of social media channels, and this way, voters for the Brexit have been somehow, with targeted advertisement on social media, somehow tricked into believing that the Brexit is the right choice. Yeah, so maybe that one used to be one of the first examples where populism, through this targeted data aggregation, somehow changed the decision of the whole nation. Yeah, and this is of course a threat. And this is heavily discussed these days. I think this is other topic. So data is definitely worth to be protected. That's why those privacy regulations are in place. And on the other hand, we're in a stage where we need compute. Yeah, because compute is like a highway. I can buy a car, but if I don't have a highway or streets, I can do nothing with the car, right? Same holds with infrastructure and the cloud, so most notably provided by the hyperscalers, is like the tool of choice. Everybody wants to move to the cloud because it's managed, it's elastic, so you can easily, scale your resources, you can shut them down when you don't need them, and you just pay for what you use, and you don't have to, pay an army of, servers in advance, put them somehow in your data center in your keller, manage it yourself, right? Because this is like, cost case, which a lot of, say, software vendors don't really want these days. So if we consider, for example, the case of hyperscalers, then there used to be something which is called the Cloud Act. It's like an US regulation that was, I think, introduced after 9/11. And in a nutshell, this Cloud Act gives say, intelligence service, American intelligence service, without much bureaucracy, the permission to, for example, ask hyperscalers, give me access to data, for example, on that server. And that may make sense, but this also somehow applies to American infrastructure providers that host data centers, for example, on European territory. Yeah, and this naturally conflicts a bit the interest of the European Union, because they would like to not only enforce data privacy, but notably data sovereignty, right? So European Union and citizens should have all privilege regarding their own data. But on the other hand, now the US infrastructure provider is asked, for example, to handle our data, even in the case if it's hosted in a data center in Paris, in Frankfurt, or Amsterdam, right? And this somehow conflicts. This conflict was solved in the beginning with the privacy shield. So this is something like a regulation that defines how those two countries share data. But unfortunately, it was shown that this Privacy Act somehow conflicts with, interests, for example, as defined in the GDPR. And now people come up, say, with, a patch of this Privacy Shield. So Privacy Shield 2.0 has been maybe published, but again, people figure out still we're not happy with that. So the situation is that we're still somehow in a gray zone, and actually we don't know whether we can legally friendly, for example, use an American infrastructure provider, even if it's hosted on European territory. And the problem, in order to summarize it, is still about data sovereignty, or speaking in other words, zero trust, in the sense that I would like to use a hyperscaler, but on the other hand, this hyperscaler needs to guarantee me that the infrastructure provider, no member administrator of the infrastructure will ever access my data, my work.
And how does technology like the one that you have an Enclaive solve the problem for the customer, for not wanting anyone to access his data, but still wanting to use the hyperscaler services?
I mean, confidential computing with the ability to enclave black box workload is like the breakthrough technology, I mean, as in the example of the bank, right? Think about now you have your safe deposit box where you can put your data. You can still use, for example, an American bank in order to host your data. But through the whole confidential compute technology, you finally have insurance that the infrastructure provider has no key. And with that key, he will never be able to open SafeBox your endpoint. And this is, from a technical point of view, a breakthrough, because before, it wasn't possible to create those enclaves. That's why people, had to come up with solutions more, say, on a legal side. But, those debates, as I mentioned before, showed that on a legal point of view, it's really, really hard to find a solution which, is a good compromise and pleases both countries, or in general, any other countries that interacts with Europe. And with confidential computing, we have finally a technical solution. So if we trust the technology, then I think coming up with a legal framework becomes secondary.
And how do you see today the maturity of clients on those kind of topics in Europe? I mean, do they understand, let's say, we can maybe talk about, small companies, medium-sized companies, large companies. How do you see the companies being aware of those topics and knowing what the solutions are and knowing where to ask for the solutions, or just trusting the marketing message, basically?
Yeah. That's also a very good question. And what we can tell is that, of course, it's a breakthrough deep tech technology. And of course, it takes time in order to inform decision makers, hey, there's a solution. But the good news is that, from our experiences, this year has been the break year. So when we, for example, talk to customers, decision makers, regulators, they are aware of confidential computing. This is, for example, a bit, motivated by the fact that hyperscalers recently completed their integration of this technology in their product offerings. So that's the beginning of streamlining or even mainstreaming the confidential compute technology in the cloud. Then the public sector, mostly, somehow regulated by the BSI, also realized that this is a breakthrough technology, and it will ease them to help to bring the public sector and the defense sector into the cloud.
I have one question, Sebastian, because you say that also the hyperscalers include this kind of technology in their product offering. So would this mean that I would give the key to my black box to the hyperscaler, or do they integrate technologies like yours or third-party technologies to provide this cloud computing software? Because if not, I would say, please, hyperscaler, take care of my data and please secure it, even though I know people can ask you to access it.
Of course, you can do it, but then it's like, giving the bank director also, the key to your safe deposit box. And this somehow renders the whole idea of having that enclave a bit void or trivial, right? Because it really works if only you have access to the key, and the bank director just offers you the service. So with our products, and one of our products is a virtual HSM. It's like a super secure key management, identity, and access management solution. For example, running in one of those enclaves. And this virtual HSM product can run anywhere. And by anywhere, of course, I mean that it should run somehow in your trusted, secure belly. Yeah, somewhere maybe in your own data center, or maybe on a European data center provider. And if you somehow implement this design, then it doesn't really matter what kind of workloads and where you book this workload, because it runs in that black box. So the infrastructure provider of your choice will not have access to the keys, and this way will be unable to look what's running in your black.
And so does this solve the problem of the fact that we say, okay, the cloud business in Europe has, the ship of the cloud business in Europe has sailed, so everyone is working with the hyperscalers, everyone is putting the data to the hyperscalers, but we have a problem with security, and basically European companies can be the layer on top of this basic service and then ensure that the data is safe and encrypted as it should be, in compliance with European law and also with the European, let's say, sovereignty. Is this how we can understand that we solve the problem of not having our own European cloud?
It's definitely a promising idea, and I think the future, if you ask me, will be in a multi-cloud situation, because whenever you go to the cloud, you not only require, say, the scalability and elasticity, but also high availability. Yeah, so you just want to make sure that your services are online 99.9%. And the way you do it is, of course, you create redundancies. So, for example, you use different data centers and different geolocations. And the best way, for example, is to mix different hyperscalers and maybe European cloud providers, data centers, whatever. In this way, I think you get the best out of the two worlds. So on one hand, you can, for example, bring in hyperscalers, which are known to be superstars and hyperscaling, but still bring in the European champions that assure you the data sovereignty, the compliance with regulations and so on.
We try to, and we also successfully do, because companies like Enclaive prove it, is that we try to work with what is just the best on the market right now in terms of cloud technologies, as far as I understand. But it still does not solve the problem of the European cloud, does it? So we are still highly dependent on hyperscalers and on their technology solutions. And how do you see European cloud providers developing technology that can, live up to the standards that we have from the hyperscalers, to have our not only the top layer, the security layer, but also the basic foundation of the cloud in Europe?
Yeah. Of course, there are promising cloud providers in Europe, for example, OVH, Scaleways, or Sys11, Decade. They do really a pretty job, but in the end, it's really about compute resources. And the nice thing about those hyperscalers is that they have tremendous compute resources. And if we go back to the idea of having this multi-cloud approach, the only reason is that you somehow need together tremendous compute resources in order to be highly available. That's why I think a combination of, say, European clouds, American clouds, or you can even put Asian clouds into the game, makes the big picture even more attractive, because you buy the compute resource anywhere, but still, thanks to confidential computing, you can be happy that your data is secure and complies with the regulations which the European Union mandates. So in the end, it's just about availability of resources. And of course, European cloud providers do a great job. But there are situations where you would like to have, for example, as a backup, additional resources on one of the hyperscalers. And that works nicely with current cloud native technologies.
Well, the other discussion that we have, especially when we look at bigger companies in Europe, so corporate companies that have, high demand of those kind of technologies. And we always have the discussion, okay, we have this great deep tech and disruptive companies like Enclaive, for example, in Europe. But I mean, you're still a small company. You're still, growing, and you're still a startup and becoming a scale-up now. And still, what we see is that from the corporate world, there's always a preference of saying, okay, I already have the American cloud provider. Let's also take the American cybersecurity or security or cloud confidential cloud provider. What do you tell those people on why it would again you would again say, I give the key not to the bank director but to his best friend, basically, and not keep it yourself?
It's true that many of them really say, hey, my whole workload is with a hyperscaler. The hyperscaler manages everything, so it's like a service on the server plate, and I'm happy with that. But the only thing we do is we just warn those people and regularly send them how those hyperscalers get hacked, and how, for example, millions of customers have then damage from data leakage, from leakage of critical business information, and so on. And it's a standard trade-off, right, between usability/convenience and, say, security and compliance. And every corporate needs to decide which kind of strategy it implements. Some of them prefer rather the easy way. Some others are, say, more responsible and, care more about the interest of a data sovereign environment. And my personal belief is it's just a matter of time, because regulators, as mentioned, for example, the BSI, but also other, European Union regulators, just learned about confidential computing, and they just start to bring this technology into their regulations. So I believe that confidential computing will be a cloud standard in near future. It's just a matter of time until say the paperwork is done. And then even corporates will be asked to leverage this technology. Because as mentioned, the technology, requires no change to code, to operations, to DevOps. It works nicely with tools that, say, developers already use. It has literally no performance penalty, right? So why shouldn't I use this bombastic security technology, if the merits, outperform the disadvantages? So I truly believe that will soon be the cloud computing standard. And then even corporates or those that prefer rather to go the easy way will need to think about the confidential cloud computing strategy.
And why should they then rather work with a European player for the confidential cloud part than with an American counterpart?
I mean, is that it's somehow natural to work, say, with a local champion in order to implement a strategy rather than, someone from a different continent? I think this is how business works these days. It's all about trust. And if you know people, even from your school or from your neighborhood that you trust, because you see them on a regular basis, then you're much more open to try out new innovative stuff than just people you never meet that claim that they can, I don't know, do whatever you want, but in the end, you have no proof point.
Yeah, this is still a very open discussion, because this is what, we try to do with the European Champions Alliance, is to put a highlight on people like you, like companies like Enclaive, who are providing this kind of, really innovative technology in Europe, and who always need to prove their point versus their American counterparts that have, as we know, bigger funding, more money, maybe also sometimes bigger clients, because they have a very different market, and so they have different means than European companies that basically need to prove it from each country to each country. This is also something that you experience with Enclaive. So we're happy to put you guys on the, let's say, on the forefront, and to show what you do, and to also show what understanding you have of the European ecosystem and how we can influence companies, smaller or bigger companies, and just not always maybe right now deciding to go with the European player, but at least giving them a chance, putting them in the RFP, and talking to them when they decide of those kind of technology purchase. So Sebastian, I've learned a lot in our podcast. Thank you very much. I now know what confidential cloud computing is. I know it a little bit better, not as good as you. So thank you very much, and very happy to get some more update in a couple of months, and to keep on working together.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It was also a pleasure to me to talk about confidential computing. And if you just want to learn more about us and what we do, I just recommend to either book the newsletter through our website, or just at our LinkedIn profile. We really try to push news around confidential computing and help this way spread the word.
Great. Thank you, Sebastian.
All right. Pleasure on my side. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of European Tech Talks until the end. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating and share it with your friends and colleagues. This will help increase our visibility on the podcast platforms. And don't forget to subscribe to receive our latest episodes. Before you go, have you considered joining the European Champions Alliance? As a member, you will have access to a network of European companies and industry experts, exclusive publications on industry-specific topics, invitations to members-only events, and support and advice on your pan-European expansion plans. If you're interested, please visit our website at european-champions.org or reach out to us on LinkedIn. See you in the next episode.